Our next speaker is going to be Megan Hunt. She's a Nebraska State Senator. Megan Hunt is a most unusual public official because she publicly identifies as an atheist. She was first elected to the unicameral Nebraska State Senate in 2018 to represent District 8 and is committed to uplifting the voices of the marginalized and forgotten. In April, she led dramatic filibusters against an anti-abortion trigger bill that would have banned abortion care in that state once the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. She publicly called the ban a church bill, sponsored by Christian religious extremists. Her impassioned remarks and filibustering were credited with helping to kill the bill in early April. Thanks to her activism, abortion is still legal in Nebraska. Megan Hunt is an entrepreneur, activist, and parent. She has worked with other senators to tackle food stamp reform, ban the harmful practice of conversion therapy, improve affordable housing, and ensure that caregivers during the pandemic were eligible for unemployment benefits. She currently sits on 5 committees in the legislature. Megan's work has been covered by major publications, and she has received numerous awards. And we're very pleased she's here today to accept this champion of the First Amendment Award. Megan Hunt.
This is very nice. If anybody wants to see this later, you can come ask me, because this is a really nice honor. It's incredible to receive this honor. It is really difficult to follow people like Dr. Butler, who I admire so much. Amy Hagstrom-Miller, who's coming up next. I met her in Washington, D.C. She probably doesn't remember, at this event when stuff was going on at the Supreme Court, and I thought she was just the coolest person ever. And I'm in this room with all these fantastic people and figures in the movement, and I just feel like this regular person, and I don't know how I got into this mess. And I don't say that to put myself down or anything, just to say, isn't it incredible in life how one choice leads to another, and then you're just oh my God, I'm responsible for things, and I never wanted this to happen, and I'm in too deep, but that's pretty much been my life, I feel like. My background is really in entrepreneurship and activism. I'm a single mom. I have a 12-year-old son who's in 7th grade, and I've just been a gal in the neighborhood for about the past 18 years. I've been a business owner in my district for about 20 years, and I ran a clothing boutique for about 12 years, and now I run a stationery store. So who I am at my core, I feel like, is a mom in the neighborhood who runs a shop. But circumstances have come into my life so many times that caused me to kind of take a fork in the road or make a different decision. And it just shows to me how everybody, you don't have to come from privilege, you don't have to have money, you don't have to have the biggest, strongest network ever. You just have to try to make the next right decision as much as possible. And you find yourself in these situations where you really have an opportunity to make a difference for people. And that has been truly the honor of my life. And whether I'm in the legislature or doing something else or not elected at all, I know that that's going to be how I continue to live out the rest of my life, because that's what gives me so much purpose. So my background is I'm as a business owner and a parent and everything. But the way I got into politics, and I never saw myself getting into politics, it was never a goal of mine. I studied German in college. I was not trying to square myself up to be in power or some big leader or anything. And in 2005, Omaha Public Schools, which is our public school district where I live, they were starting to consider updates to their comprehensive sex education curriculum. At the time, our human growth and development, or sex ed curriculum, hadn't been updated since 1971. So in some cases, you had kids getting the same sex ed that their grandparents had gotten. And of course, since 1971, we have had the AIDS epidemic. We've had an increasingly depressed and suicidal LGBTQ+ population. We have the internet and everything that comes along with that. So even though sex is basically the same, like, there's a lot more going on in society, and we know that kids aren't getting accurate information about their own biology and their bodies and the kinds of information that they need to make responsible decisions for their futures. In my county in Nebraska at the time, we also had the highest rates of STDs and STIs in the entire country. And I was part of a group of people who knew that to make a difference in that number for public health, for the health of our kids, comprehensive sex education could go a long way for that. It was as contentious as some of you probably can guess. There were public hearings, there was outcry, there were rallies on both sides, for and against. At one public school board meeting, there was physical fighting, people shouting slurs at LGBTQ kids, adults, like harassing children this way. And I was in this room, this overflow room, because the meeting was so big, and I'm looking around just thinking, all we're talking about is teaching kids medically accurate, age-appropriate, research-based, biological information about their bodies and their health. And the violence and the anger that this inspires in my neighbors, in the people around us in our community, shows how little respect we have for ourselves, for each other, for public health, and for the researchers and scientists and people who do all the work to bring this information to us so we can make the best decisions. And that really concerned me. So, long story short, we did it. We ended up updating the curriculum. The school board voted to add comprehensive sex education to the curriculum. It was very difficult. It was super arduous. Can't believe we did it. And I found that people, for the first time, were seeing me not just as a business leader, but maybe as a political leader, because I had organized lots of letters to the editor, I had organized a whole bunch of rallies, I had done a lot of work with parents and teachers, myth-busting and trying to debunk things the other side was saying, and I was part of a group that really led the charge on this. And so I started asking around and saying, if I ran for the legislature, would you support me? And everywhere I turned, people were like, yes, you should run, you should do it, you should do it. And all of us have like friends or cousins or neighbors where we think of them when we're like, they should run for office. They would be really good in city council, or they would be really good in the House of Representatives. They would be really good on the school board. But they don't run because they don't want to get involved in all this BS that we have to deal with. Keep pushing those people. And I'm really glad that I was asking around and trying to get people's support, because when I announced that I was running, everybody in my neighborhood and my community was right there with me. And I really needed their support, because once I was elected, in 2018, I won by a landslide and became the first queer person elected to the legislature and the first woman elected from my district. Not to... Thank you. I'm proud of that, but I also kind of say it's a dubious honor, because it's not great that it took until 2018 to elect an LGBTQ person. And again, not to put myself down, but I'm kind of like the Diet Coke of gay culture. Like, there's nothing challenging going on here. Like, we have a long way to go for representation. And I feel a responsibility not just to like speak for those people, but to hold the door open behind me and make sure that people from all kinds of life experiences are able to serve in public office, because we know that government works better when it actually reflects the identities of the people it serves. And that's some old rich white men. There's some of you out there. You should have some representation, but there's too much, right? And in Nebraska, we've never had a Jewish state senator. We've never had a Muslim state senator. We don't have a lot of representation from people of different nationalities or different abilities. And all of these things denigrate government to me. I'm happy to be a non-believer, and I can represent that group as well as I can as an individual, but I don't represent the scope of experiences of the people of Nebraska or the people around the country whose work, who our work affects, So that's a big mission that I've had. I want to ask, I know that I'm speaking to like an extremely friendly room, and a lot of you have been very active in this movement for decades. How many of you know Senator Ernie Chambers? Yeah. Okay, so for those of you who don't, I'm glad that he has some fans here. Senator Ernie Chambers is the longest serving state senator in Nebraska's history. He served for 46 years. They implemented term limits because of him. And he was often also the only black senator in the legislature. Many, many years, he was the only person of color and the only black man that was elected in the legislature. And he was a very, he's dead. He was. I'm not trying to eulogize him, but he, during his time in the legislature, has been an extremely important mentor and friend to me. And so receiving this award, Champion of the First Amendment, is even more meaningful to me because he received this award in 2004. Somebody will know, but he received this award in the past, and I know that this organization means a lot to him. And when I got into the legislature, we sat next to each other by chance, and we really, really hit it off. And it wasn't because we're both non-believers. It wasn't just that. I think that we both understand what it feels like when you think the government doesn't notice you or care about you or work for you. And it's so important, and I tell this to young people all the time, that young people especially, as they're starting to get involved in civic engagement and voting and things like that, that they understand that the government is literally for you. It's not above you, it's not better than you, it's not too difficult for you to understand, it's not for people smarter than you. It's made up of people just like you, and it exists for you. And so I really try to encourage people to get involved, whether that's deciding to run for office or being engaged with the nonprofit community where you live. All of these things are so important for our civic health. And everything that Dr. Butler said before me, and many other speakers have said here, and all of you already know because we're preaching to the choir, is that civic health is really bad right now. And the more we can react positively to that and get people involved in a positive way, maybe we can keep it on life support. It's a difficult time for sure, and it's a difficult time to be elected. One of my favorite stories, I'll tell one story about Senator Chambers. My second year in the legislature, so Senator Chambers was really well known for his filibusters. He could talk for hours and hours and hours. The whole floor would be empty. All the senators would be like, well, Ernie's talking, so I'm gonna go back to my office. I'm gonna go back to my office and get some things done because I know it's gonna be hours before we get to anything. And that's a skill. That's a skill that I really have tried to learn from him and that he has taught me how to use the rules, how to use procedures, motions, amendments to hold things up. Because even at the end of the day, in a conservative state like Nebraska or like Texas, when we don't have the votes to stop something terrible, or we don't have the numbers that we need to get something done that needs to be done, we do have time. And the gift that he gave me is just understanding how to use these procedures so that we can take up as much time as possible. And we were debating an abortion restriction bill in 2019, and he traditionally would be leading a filibuster on something like that. I mean, he's the old timer, he's experienced, he's teaching the rest of us, because now in the era of term limits, we have a lot less of an idea of what's going on, and so his mentorship was very important. And as we're debating this abortion restriction bill, he's in his office downstairs the entire time. And I'm filing these motions, I'm keeping my light on so I can keep talking. It's been hours, I'm filing amendments, like going off on all these little tangents, doing my best. I love this work. But the whole time, he never came upstairs to help. And I was like a little perturbed by this. I'm like, I gotta do all this myself now, what's going on? And at the end of the bill, when we had the vote, it was like 16 hours or something of talking. He came upstairs for the vote, and we lost, of course, but we didn't make it easy. And that's the other thing that I've learned, is that another tool that you have in the toolbox, even if you're not gonna win the day, even if you're not gonna win the war or the battle that day, you cannot make it easy for them. You have to make them go home at the end of the night sad and tired and exhausted, in a bad mood, regretting the day they brought that bill because it was no fun to pass it. And that's what I feel like I've been able to do with every abortion restriction that has come through Nebraska. Even though we can't always hold them off, they regret it because we made it so painful for them. And that's what gives me pleasure. And I do think that's a deterrent. I think that makes people think twice about introducing some little thing. They go, Megan's gonna make it too tough, so let's not. But that day that we had that vote, and Ernie came upstairs, he came over to talk to me, and I said, I was sad, because of course we lost the vote, so we're never gonna have the numbers for this kind of thing. And he put his hands on my shoulder like this, and he goes, "Did you do everything you could?" And I said, "Yes, I did everything I could." And he says, "Well, then how can anyone ask any more of you?" And I think about that all the time when it feels like a loss is inevitable, especially as a progressive in a conservative state. If you've done your best, how can anybody ask any more of you? And I asked him, I said, "Where were you? Like, were you just in your office the whole time? Why didn't you come up?" And he goes, "Because I needed to know that when I'm not here anymore, that you can do that." Yeah. I still tear up, thinking about that moment. But the Nebraska Legislature is a very special place. It's the only nonpartisan legislature in the country. It's the only one-house legislature in the country, so we don't have a House and a Senate. And it's also the smallest legislature in the country with just 49 members. So we don't have any majority-minority leaders. We don't have any caucuses. All of our leadership is elected by the whole body with a secret ballot. So there's no overt party pressure to vote for the right person or anything. And for that reason, even though Democrats are in the minority, we actually have an outsized majority of committee chairmen, because when the ballot is secret and you're able to actually vote for the person who's best for the job, progressives tend to take those positions. So it's a very special place. But my view is just, if I get to serve 8 years in the legislature, I'm up for re-election right now in 2 weeks. Hopefully I'll find out that I can go back in there in January. But in the pie chart of my life, the small time that I get to be in the legislature, be a state senator, wear my little pin, have people call me senator in the hallway, that's such a small slice of my life. And it's really a gift to have this time to talk for 16 hours a day, to frustrate conservatives as much as possible, but to get the death threats, to get the rape threats, to get doxxed, to get my child threatened at school, to get all the things that come with as Dr. Butler said, the danger that sometimes we need to put ourselves in to make a meaningful difference, and ask yourself, what more are you willing to do to make the change you need to see in the world? I'm very mindful that I don't want to waste that gift, that I won't have this platform forever, and you know, these awards are really nice, and it's very nice to meet all of you and receive this recognition. And I just want to thank you. I'm happy to take any questions if people have them.
So I wanted to tell you, Megan, that Ernie Chambers got the same award in 2005. And he later got another award, too.
He got the Emperor Has
He
No
got
Clothes.
the Emperor Has No Clothes award. Very
Pursuing
deserved.
God.
So we can take 5 minutes of questions, and I think, is Sam available there to help shepherd? And oh, okay.
You know, I've been asked many times about running for Congress, and right now I tell them you need me more in the Nebraska Legislature than you need me in Congress. But maybe that day will come.
Hi, Megan. Thank you for that wonderful, inspiring presentation there. I live in a very red part of California, very red. And although I've been very politically active in my industry of motorcycle training, I've had 2 laws passed in Sacramento, 1 passed in DC, even signed by Donald Trump. Fortunately, motorcycle training is not a partisan issue. But my question is, for those of us that are free thinkers, it's always been difficult for me to imagine even running for office, especially, you know, where I live. What advice do you have for people who are considering that in areas where that would be unthinkable normally?
I think we got to get out of our own way a little bit. People don't care that much. I think that we blow up, you know, we see so much Christian nationalism on TV. All of that is very present right now in our minds in the national electorate, but on these local level races, when we're talking about city council or school board or even legislature, even Congress in a lot of your congressional districts, you're able to literally meet all of your voters. You can knock doors. The first time I ran, I knocked 22,000 doors. We had events all the time. Everybody already knew who I was because I was very active in the community anyway, which I think you ought to be if you want to run for office. You should already have an investment in that community instead of trying to backfill it and say, well, I want to run for office. Wait, who am I? Well, let me introduce myself. You know, they have to already know you, and you already have to have an investment in that community. And, you know, everybody's faith journey is so personal. I was raised Catholic. I was never really Catholic. I feel like I left the faith when I was 6 or something. But, you know, we go through life and we take experiences that add to our faith, and we examine parts of our faith and say, I want to leave that behind, or that doesn't work for me, or this tradition from something else does work for me, or now I'm into astrology. Oh, now I don't believe in anything. And that's a very human, normal thing. And there may be a perception that there's this very powerful evangelical block of voters that's going to decide every election. But when you talk to voters and you get to know them, that has not been my experience, even in a conservative state.
Hi, Megan. I saw you on Free Thought Matters or Ask an Atheist, and last night at the bar I saw your profile. I didn't recognize you, and I'm sorry, but now that I have recognized you, I would have bought you a drink last night, but I'd like to buy
Were
you a
you
drink
sitting
now.
next to me?
I was, and I watched your flatbread pizza as you went to the
Are
bathroom.
you who
and
I
told
asked
me
to watch my stuff?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
That was me.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I love this group.
I want I want to say how much I admire your courage and how you downplayed the fact that your family gets threatened, you get threatened. And I want to say to our group that it's great that we come here, but sometimes we need to do things that threaten us when there's a really important cause. And when we do that, it can be really frightening. But I want to say that before our lives end, it's good to know that we've done all we can. So thank you.
Thank you. That's very true. One thing that I do in my community, if you have this in your community, you should do this, is I volunteer at our abortion clinic. And like our introducer, Jeremiah, said, we're very lucky in Nebraska that abortion is still legal. We were able to stop a full ban. It was another one of those many day-long filibusters that I helped lead. And you know, in Nebraska at our clinic, we see license plates from Texas every day. We see license plates from Louisiana and Indiana. We're starting to see license plates from Florida. And we escort these patients through crowds of everything you can imagine in terms of hate being thrown at them and thrown at us as escorts. And many of these people we help are having medical emergencies, have no money, have no family support, are only staying here overnight at a hotel that's paid for by an abortion fund, and then they have to drive all the way back to Florida or Texas as they recover from a procedure. And this is really a time for mutual aid. When government has really let us down, when government is not there for us for our health care, for our job security, for the health of our communities, whatever it is, we now more than ever have to have each other's backs, because we can no longer just pay our taxes and think the government's going to take care of it. It's really, we have each other's backs, and we have us. And I would think of it not as a marathon, but as a relay. And when you need to, think about who you can pass the baton to and what kind of legacy you can leave through that. Thank you, Annie. I gave you this, yes.